When Ash awoke again, he found Pikachu and Muk looking down upon him. Bright light streamed into the window now. Ash blinked a few times before sitting up and finding himself lying on the floor next to the bed. "What happened?" he asked groggily. The back of his head hurt, which meant it all hadn't been a dream. Deciding to investigate, Ash dressed himself and grabbed his hat, and he and his 2 Pokémon walked out of the cabin. "Captain," he called, "Captain." He was searching the interior of the ship. Numerous Pokémon were cowering behind boxes and machine parts as he walked around. He was perplexed as to what might have happened. Eventually, he found himself on the deck of the ship again, and was shocked at what he saw. The ship was in the middle of a desert now, and large parts of it were broken off and lying in the sand around the main body. What happened? Ash asked himself. Suddenly, he heard voices. "Is the next transport ready?" he heard someone ask. "Just a few more Pokémon and it should be," came the answer. 2 men dressed in strange white outfits and wearing red bandanas walked around the side of the ship. White helmets covered their faces. Ash, Pikachu, and Muk all ducked behind some boxes that were nearby and listened in. "One last inspection," one of them said, throwing a Pokeball into the air. A white light flashed, and a Poochyena came out. "Sniff around, Poochyena," the trainer ordered. The Poochyena immediately set its nose to the ground and began sniffing, right towards Ash. "Here it comes," said Ash, holding his breath. "Pikachu, if it gets too close, use Thunderbolt." Pikachu nodded, just as the Poochyena turned the corner of the boxes. It lifted its head, growled in a feral tone, and charged directly at them. Pikachu zapped. Immediately, the 2 men ran over, releasing 3 more Pokémon between them. They were a Ninjask, Ledyba, and Voltorb. The Poochyena ran back to its owner as though it hadn't been hit. Ash stood up, realizing he had been discovered, and prepared for a battle. "Who are you?" he asked the 2 men. "You don't need to know that, kid," said the one with the Voltorb and Poochyena. Voltorb, use Spark, and Poochyena, Shadow Blitz. The 2 Pokémon charged their respective attacks and attacked. "Muk, use Protect," Ash yelled swiftly. Muk got in front of her teammates and put up a green wall of light. "Dang it!" the other grunt yelled as the attacks bounced off. Ninjask, Fury Cutter, and Ledyba, use Shadow Blitz. Ninjask shot forward at lightning speed, but Pikachu zapped it with Thunderbolt, while Muk swamped the Ledyba. Ash was quite confused as this was going on. Whereas the Voltorb and Ninjask seemed to be tiring, the other 2, the Ledyba and Poochyena, didn't seem to be affected at all. They had also used attacks Ash had never seen before. "Pikachu, use Electro Ball, and Muk, use Sludge Bomb," Ash ordered. Pikachu charged his attack and fired a ball of yellow electrical energy, while Muk opened her mouth wide and fired a few shots of poison at their opponents. The attacks made direct contact, and the Ninjask and Voltorb were knocked out, but the Poochyena and Ledyba still seemed unfazed. The 2 of them returned their fainted Pokémon and gritted their teeth. "Stupid kid!" they yelled in unison. "Get them!" A double Shadow Blitz flew at Ash, but Muk blocked the blow with Protect. The 2 abnormal Pokémon were thrown back, but still seemed unfazed. "Pikachu, one last time, use Thunderbolt," Ash yelled. Pikachu charged his electrical energy and fired a blast of electricity at the 2 Pokémon. They finally wobbled and fell over. The 2 men showed a look of panic on their faces. "What do we do?" the first one asked the second. "I don't know," said the second one. "We'll have to send in more troops later. I'm sure the boss will understand." With that, they ran towards the edge of the ship and jumped off. Ash ran to the edge in shock and watched them get into a strange vehicle, which propelled itself across the sand, vanishing in the distance within seconds. Ash turned to the 2 Pokémon they had left behind. He walked up to them and bent down to pet them, but they suddenly jumped up and the Poochyena snapped at him. "Hey, I'm trying to help you," Ash cried. The Poochyena had none of his words and ran off, disappearing into the ship. The Ledyba tackled Ash to the ground and then made an attempt to fly off. "Muk, use Sludge Bomb," Ash called. Muck opened its mouth and shot the Ledyba out of the air with a single blast of poison. The little Pokémon fell to the ground and tried to fly off again, but Ash picked it up. It head-butted him multiple times, but he didn't let go. "What is wrong with you?" Ash asked pleadingly. The Ledyba wouldn't stop attacking him. Finally, Ash dropped it and it fell to the ground again. It tried to fly off, but it couldn't. Ash fell to his knees from all of the hits he had just taken. The Ledyba collapsed from exhaustion. Ash pulled out a Pokeball from his belt. "Hey Ledyba, you're hurt," he said. "Why don't you come with me and I'll get you something to heal you?" The Ledyba turned around to him and glared at him with a feral stare. It charged at him enveloped in a shadowy aura, just as it had when the men had commanded it to Shadow Blitz before. But Ash threw the Pokeball before it could reach him. To his utmost shock, the Pokeball opened, and the Ledyba went inside. After a few seconds, the Pokeball snapped shut and Ash picked it up off of the ground. "What's going on around here?" he asked himself. After searching through the ship numerous times, he found that there was an exit that had been ripped in the hull. He could see the tracks of many Pokémon in the sand around the ship, which must have meant that many of the ones on the ship had run off. He was saddened to think that they were lost in the desert somewhere. Of course, those guys had talked about some sort of transport. Perhaps they had been trying to rescue the Pokémon. "No," Ash said to himself, looking at Ledyba's Pokeball. "Anyone who has a Pokémon like this can't possibly care about Pokémon." Something was wrong with the Ledyba. Ash couldn't connect with it somehow. He knew because his aura, which had aided him many times, could not comprehend the aura around the Ledyba. He wondered if it was one of the shadow Pokémon that Professor Crane had been talking about. "I wonder where we are," said Ash, "and what happened to the crew." Pikachu's ears drooped in the heat, and Ash returned Muck to her Pokeball so that she wouldn't get sand all over her. He didn't stray far from the ship, but that was the least of his worries. Out of nowhere, a sandstorm began brewing around him. "Darn it!" he yelled, getting sand in his mouth. He fell to the ground and the sand beat him down to unconsciousness. When Ash woke up again, he found himself lying on a soft bench staring up at the ceiling of some sort of engine. He checked his belt, and found that the two Pokeball enclosed Pokémon were still there. Then he sat up with a start and looked around. "Where am I?" he asked in panic. "The outskirts stand," said a voice on the opposite side from where he was sitting. Ash looked over. He was sitting at a table inside an old-fashioned steam engine car. A jukebox played low and jazzy tunes. Pikachu was standing on the table next to a man with purple spiky hair. Pikachu jumped onto his shoulder. "Pikachu," Ash exclaimed. "Are you all right?" Pikachu responded happily. "Great," said Ash jovially. Then he turned to the man. "Thanks for saving us," he said. "No problem," said the man. "The name's Willy. You seemed pretty wiped out walking out there alone in the desert. I wouldn't think anyone would risk going out in a sandstorm like that, much less go that far out in the first place." "Then why were you out there?" asked Ash. "The outskirt stand is only about a mile or two from where I found you," Willy said, scratching the back of his head. "I practically live here. What were you doing out in the desert?" "Well, you see," Ash started. He told Willy what had happened with the SS Libra. Willy nodded along to the short story. "So that's what that was," he said. "People claimed to have seen something enormous flying across Ore last night. Someone even thought it was a flying Wailord." "That must have been the Libra," said Ash. Willy nodded. "And you say you were supposed to meet Professor Crane at the HQ lab in the north, said Willy. "Of course," said Ash. Willy grinned. "All right, I'll take you there," he said, "but not until you have a battle with me." Ash stood up. "You're on," Ash exclaimed, Pikachu mirroring his movements. Willy stood up. "Let's go outside then," he said. He walked out and Ash followed. Just outside the outskirts stand was what appeared to be train wreckage in the middle of the desert. There was nothing around for miles but sand, and broken axles and wheels lied around everywhere. Willy picked two Pokeballs from his belt. "I should probably explain to you this, Ash," he said with a mischievous smile. Everyone you battle here in Ore will ask for a double battle and nothing else. It's just the way we do things. Ash nodded. Alright then, he said, reaching for his belt. He wanted to use Ledyba, but when he touched the Pokeball, it shook violently and then stopped. Ash moved his hand over hesitantly as he realized again that Ledyba seemed to really not like him. He grabbed Muck's Pokeball and held it up. I'm ready, said Ash confidently. That's what I like to hear, said Willy, Zigzagoon and Linoone. You're up. The two Pokeballs were thrown and both Pokemon flew out in a flash of blue light. They waited patiently as Ash called out his two. Muck, Pikachu, I choose you, he yelled, throwing Muck's Pokeball as Pikachu jumped off of his shoulder. Muck appeared next to Pikachu and the battle began.